Davidson and I'm the founder of Raw Amber Studios. Since we're all stuck inside at the moment, I thought it would be a good idea to do some online portrait drawing. I'm going to show 3 photographs on the screen, a 10-minute pose, a 20-minute pose and a 30-minute pose. You can draw by yourself or get around the kitchen table with your family and draw as a group, or jump on a Skype call or a WhatsApp group chat, or use Zoom to draw with your friends. Lisette Dingemans will be drawing along with us, so you'll see her work in the corner of the screen. Once you've finished, don't forget to upload your photographs to Instagram and tag them with #RawAmberLive. Okay, let's get started.
Hi everybody, welcome to another Raw Amber Studios live drawing session. I'm Lisette Dingemans. I am a Dutch artist living in London and I am classically trained and I teach portraiture on the side. And in this tutorial I'm going to take you through how to draw a portrait. We're going to be doing 3 poses today, one 10-minute, one 20-minute and one 30-minute pose. Feel free to mute me if you find my voice distracting. But in the meantime, let's get started. Now for this first pose, we've got a 3/4 view. And I'm going to take you through how to draw it. For this very first pose, you don't need to worry about finish that much. We're just going to try and warm up a little bit. I'm using charcoal on grey paper in this tutorial, but feel free to use pencil or another medium that you feel comfortable with. I usually start with drawing a box for the head. It's very good to be able to measure how wide the head is compared to how long it is. In this case, it's definitely longer than it's wide. What I try to do is get a 3-dimensional box going with the front plane of the face and the side plane of the skull. Now when you've got your box in and the main size of the head, what I try and do is straight away put in the main features. So what that means is the brow and the nose. They are usually spaced equally so in the skull. So what that means is the brow is usually 1/3, the nose is then another third, and the chin is the final third. So you can usually divide up the skull in 3 sections. And those things I put in straight away, so I have an idea of, is this person, do they have a high brow, do they have a low brow, that sort of thing. Alright, so now we've got our main box in with our main features. So let's have a look at what to do next. What I do is I usually put in the center line, so the line going from the nose all the way to the middle of the brow to the middle of the chin, and that gives me an indication of how far away this person is looking. Are they further away from the viewpoint, from the viewer, or are they a bit more pointed towards you? Once you've got that in, you can start looking at the angles of the face. Some people have a wider cheekbone and a more narrow chin. Some people have a wider chin, more narrow cheekbone. So those angles you can start working out and sort of. Now we can do the same thing with the angles from the cheekbone to the forehead, as well as the angles from the jaw. I also like to put the ear in as soon as possible. The ear is usually located below the brow and above the nose. So using our box, we already know how these two are related, so you can just place the ear straight away. Next up, what I like to do is get into shading really quickly. The reason for this is that it gives you a lot of information without getting too precise. One thing that can happen with drawing is that you get too invested too soon. And with this warm-up, what we're trying to do is just kind of get everything in place as quickly as possible. So I like to do that by getting into big blocks and big straight lines. Okay, so let's just sketch in all the main masses like that. So I've got the eyes in, the nose in, and the mouth in. And next what I'm going to do is just sort of sketch out the outline of the skull. So you're just sort of carving into your box here, and you try and sort of sculpt it so it becomes a little bit more skull-like and a little bit less box-like, if you will. At this point, it's also a good idea to figure out where the neck is. There are two big muscles behind the ears attached to the skull there. They're called the mastoids. They always go from just behind the ear all the way to the pit of the neck. So they're really useful to figure out how does the head sit on the shoulders. So that's the two main lines that I've put down here. At this point, we don't really need anything else. Again, it's best not to get too involved right now and always work from big to small. So now we've got all the big planes in. Let's start breaking down those planes into slightly smaller shapes. So what you can do is you can move your way down from, for instance, the eye socket, start breaking it down. Always still keep trying to look for the bigger stuff. Don't get too invested in the small stuff. It's still a quick warm up, but just try and break things down a little bit more and just move your way around the picture. All right, so I think that was the 10-minute pose, so let's move on to the 20-minute one. Okay, so for this second pose, we've got a side view, which is actually a little bit easier. We don't need to do a 3/4 box, a 3D box, we can just have a flat box. So what I try and do, as I did with the last one, is I first check, is the head taller than is wide, or is it an exact square? In this case, it's an exact square. So this will be a 20-minute pose, which means that we're going to take this a little bit farther than the last one, but we're going to start very similar like we did in the first one. I start with just drawing in where I can see the brow. In this case, we can also use the ear as a nice line that sort of divides the skull in half, which is what I did at the first. Next, what I'll do is I'm going to put in the main lines for the eye socket and for the jaw. And straight away, I try and start sketching and sculpting into that skull like we did in the first one. When you've got a side profile, you also have a center line, and that basically is the main line that sort of, if you had to simplify the whole front of the head into one line, what would it be? Now that is what I use as my center line, and I can see that, for instance, in her face, her jaw is in front of her brow, so that's something that's really useful to measure. The center line is always directly perpendicular to the line that leads from the ear all the way to the eye socket, as you can see on my drawing. Again, I'm going to start by shading fairly quickly, and this is like it was in the last drawing, just to get as much information in with as little effort as possible, so we can actually start breaking the drawing down quickly. When I start working out where the features are located, I always try and go from the first rule that we learned in the first video, and then I start looking at, for instance, the top lip. Is it halfway the nose and the chin, or is it a little bit higher or lower than that? And that's a useful way to see where the features are located. You can also use the rubber to carve out what you've previously done, so you don't have to be scared of putting down charcoal or pencil in if you're using that, because you can always use the eraser to then sculpt things out again. And again, in this drawing as well, the ear will be located below the nose and above the brow, so we know where to place that. And again, it's perpendicular to the general front plane of the face. I think we've got a good sort of general blocking going, so now we can start breaking it down a little bit more. Like we did with last drawing, I started with my big planes and my big shadow shapes, and now I've got everything roughly in place. I'm going to start breaking every element of the face down just a little bit more without getting too invested in every bit. In this case as well, always try and see how the corner of the mouth and the corner of the nose relates to the eye socket, if it's in the middle or on the edge, the outer edge of the eye, and then you can just take that down and you know where your features are placed. Now I've got all my big stuff in, I'm starting to spend a little bit more time on every individual feature and giving it a few minutes each just to sort of get a bit more precise about the drawing there. Okay, so that's the 10-minute mark. We're halfway down the drawing. I hope you're having a nice time. Don't forget to have fun. I know it's a lot of work, it can be hard to do a portrait, but don't forget to just always have a lot of fun while doing it. As you can see, I'm constantly refining my drawing. My first marks are never right. That is something that I think a lot of beginners sometimes get a bit nervous over. It's best to just put down a mark and then change it later rather than try and be perfect the first go. I know the photograph has a lot of different tones and not just shadow and light. In these first two warm-ups, the 10 and 20-minute pose, we're mainly going to focus on just shadow and light, and in the final one, the 30-minute pose, we're going to get into a little bit more of a breakdown of how to render, how to make it look a bit more pretty. Alright, so that was it for the 20-minute pose. Up next will be the 30-minute one. Alright, so this will be the last 30-minute pose. As you can see, it's a front view, and we're going to start this drawing exactly like we did the other two. And we're first of course going to start with that box. Next up, what we're going to do is put the main features in. So again, brow line, nose line, chin and forehead. And like we did with the other ones, we're going to start with getting the main shadows in first, just to get as much information on the paper as possible. I use the shadows to sketch in the hair, the side of the face, the nose, the brow and the lips. Because this drawing is going to be a bit longer, I'm going to start flattening the shadows a bit earlier on using my brush. This is to make it more clear to see what is shadow and what is light exactly. You can also use the brush to already start softening some edges. So as you can see on the photograph, not every shadow shape is equally harsh. It's not always a harsh line. Sometimes it's actually a little bit softer, a little bit vaguer. That's why I use the brush to sort of blend it a little bit more. As you can see, I am already starting to break down every feature, starting with the lips, and I'm working my way up. When working my way up, I try to use a darker line where there is a harsher edge and the brush where there is a soft edge. And by edge I mean the division between light and shadow. The reason for that is that we do need to know where the eyes are sort of located so you can draw more easily. Also, remember what I said in the last pose. Your lines don't need to be perfect. Just put something down and then just start correcting it. We don't always have to be perfect from the get-go. Okay, so I'm starting to break the eye down a little bit, and as you can see, it's really the same principle we used in the other drawings, just a little bit more precise. So instead of drawing an eye as we know an eye with an eyeball and that sort of thing, I just look at what's dark and what's light and I try and draw those shapes in. Do try and keep the information in the shadows to an absolute minimum. You don't want people to look into the shadows. You want the focus to be on the light half of our face. So try and just sort of not to put too much detail in the shadows. Okay, so we're about to hit the 20-minute mark, and with this drawing, the final one, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Because I'm working on grey paper, I can also start pulling out the lights using a white pencil. So for this I use a white pastel chalk. Now if you're working with pencil or with charcoal on white paper, you can also do this by gently rubbing a thin layer of pencil or charcoal over the whole of your drawing, and then use the rubber to further pull out the lights instead of using the white pencil. When using the white to pull some of the light out, what I try and do is first go for the lightest bits, and the harshest bits as well. So for me, when I look at the photo, I see the lightest bits on the bottom of her lower lip and on the side of her cheekbone. So that's where I'm going to start. Generally, we will want the whole side of her face that's in the light completely covered with the white chalk, or rubbered out if we be using white paper. This is also a point when you can start getting a bit more detailed with your drawing finally. We've got a bit more time, so you might as well spend that time resolving the drawing a bit more and having some fun. All right, I think that's the end of the 30-minute pose already. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves and hopefully see you next week.
Thank you for taking part. Don't forget to post your work on Instagram and tag it with hashtag #RawAmberLive. I'd like to thank Lizette Dingemans for doing the drawing demonstration, and you can download photographs of the model from the link I'm about to show you on the screen. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram. We're Raw Amber Studios. I'm going to run this every Sunday as long as the current situation continues, so I'll see you next week.